The relationship between Penn Badgley and his character, Joe Goldberg, is anything but simple. Today on Collider, we're diving deep into how Penn prepared for his challenging role in You. Let's get started. For nearly a decade, Penn Badgley has inhabited the deeply unsettling role of Joe Goldberg in Netflix's psychological thriller, You. As the fifth and final season wraps, Badgley finds himself both relieved and reflective about a character who has profoundly shaped his 30s and left a lasting impact on his personal and professional life. When Badgley first took on the role at age 30, he was newly married and stepping into fatherhood. Now at 38, Badgley says goodbye to a character whose obsession, manipulation, and violence served as both a challenge and a mirror, causing him a lot of reflection through the journey of portraying him. You isn't just a serial killer drama, it's a commentary on modern myths about love, masculinity, and the masks people wear. Badgley saw Joe as a cautionary tale, an extreme exploration of the traits men are often taught to value: confidence, intelligence, and romantic persistence. A deeply thoughtful person, Badgley has used his platform to address gender dynamics, violence, and the portrayal of sexuality in entertainment. On his podcast Pod Crushed, he's spoken candidly about his discomfort with intimate scenes and the broader issues of sexual representation on screen. Throughout You, Badgley insisted on reducing intimate scenes, working with the showrunner to make Joe's interactions less glamorous and more grounded in the reality of his toxicity. Despite this, the show has still faced criticism for romanticizing its central character. With his brooding gaze and quiet charm, Badgley brought unexpected depth and, even more controversially, likability to a character who stalks and kills the women he claims to love. "I've always wanted to make him less likable," Badgley admits, "but I struggled with that. The question of whether he was too likable has been my concern throughout the entirety of the series." He acknowledges that the show had to balance satire, camp, and social commentary in order to work. "It's never meant to feel utterly real," he says, noting that the absurdity helps buffer viewers from the more disturbing implications of Joe's actions. As the show evolved, moving Joe from New York to Los Angeles, then to London, the themes remained constant: obsession, identity, and the deceptive narratives people construct about themselves and others. In the later seasons, Joe reinvents himself as an English professor, only to spiral into another cycle of fixation. Still, the character has grown darker, and Badgley says he physically felt the toll during the final shoot. "It was as though I couldn't sustain the rage anymore," he says of filming Joe's last scenes. "I couldn't sustain the levels of artifice. I had to cough or vomit up the words." Off-screen, Badgley's life took a radically different path from the character he portrayed. After struggling with fame and body image as a young actor, he describes feeling dysmorphic about his body, especially during his transition from childhood to adolescence. Badgley eventually found grounding in the Baha'i faith. He meditates and prays daily, which, alongside family life, has provided him with stability and a sense of purpose. "That is what allowed me to persevere through the disillusionment," he says. Penn Badgley's approach to playing Joe Goldberg wasn't about mimicking a serial killer or diving into the realm of method acting. Instead, it was an intensely internal process, one that required him to dig deep into his own emotions and psychology. For Badgley, Joe became more than just a character. He allowed him to examine some of the darker, uncomfortable truths about masculinity, love, and power. Badgley has explained how the role forced him to look at his own identity and personal relationships. Rather than simply playing a bad guy, he saw Joe as a distorted reflection of modern myths about love and masculinity. Joe's behavior and beliefs about relationships weren't just his own. They represented a perverse version of ideals that many men are raised to believe in. Through Joe, Badgley could explore how societal expectations of love and masculinity can lead people down dangerous paths. Badgley didn't approach the character as a villain to sympathize with, but as a challenge to understand. It wasn't about humanizing Joe in any traditional sense, but about confronting the darkest sides of human behavior, understanding the traumas and beliefs that could push someone to such extreme actions. It was a process of reflection, one that made him consider how easy it could have been for him, or anyone, to slide into the same patterns as Joe. This complex character forced him to ask himself what choices and experiences could have made him turn out differently. What made Badgley's portrayal so effective wasn't just his ability to bring Joe to life, but his focus on emotional truth. He didn't want to soften Joe's actions or make him more sympathetic. Instead, he took a psychological approach, trying to understand the roots of Joe's behavior and what made him tick. Badgley didn't just see Joe as a fictional killer. He saw him as a person shaped by very real issues like trauma, isolation, and warped views of love. His performance walked a fine line between satire and realism. showing how Joe's delusions made him dangerous, but also exposing the absurdity of the way he justified his actions. Rather than letting the character consume him, Badgley used the role as a way to define his own boundaries. He described playing Joe not as a process of transformation, but of confrontation. By stepping into Joe's shoes, Badgley had to grapple with the very things he rejects: his toxic masculinity, his warped views on relationships, and his sense of entitlement. Penn Badgley has never exactly been cool with how obsessed people are with Joe Goldberg, the twisted lead character he plays in You. Since the start of the show, he's been pretty vocal about how uncomfortable it is when fans romanticize or even root for Joe. Badgley has shown his concern that viewers might misunderstand the character, thinking that Joe's problems would be solved if he found the right person or experienced true love. For Badgley, this perspective is troubling because it ignores the fact that Joe's actions are far beyond just needing a relationship to fix him. Penn affirms that Joe is, after all, a murderer. Over the years, Badgley's pushed back against fans who make jokes about wanting to be kidnapped by Joe or think he's some kind of dark heartthrob. He's even called people out on social media for it. Talking with Stephen Colbert, he admitted it's been a real challenge to play someone so awful, especially when the character still comes off as likable at times. Joe has become a pop culture icon, but for Badgley, that's actually a little scary. As he once said to Vice, the way people reacted to the character confirmed both his greatest fears and hopes about how audiences engage with media. Despite not really liking Joe as a character, he once said, "To be honest, I don't enjoy nearly everything about him." Badgley still felt it was important to play him with a sense of responsibility. In a chat with the New York Times, he explained that Joe is basically a symbol of privilege, someone who gets away with terrible things because of how he looks and the way society is set up. Joe, he said, is like a twisted mirror held up to the world. As we mentioned, Badgley became a dad in real life around the same time Joe did on the show. But instead of finding common ground, the contrast between their experiences made things even weirder. While he was enjoying fatherhood in real life, Joe was spiraling in fear and control issues. Sometimes it was almost not helpful because I was having a light and joyful experience. Joe was so petrified, Badgley confessed to Access Hollywood. One thing Badgley is really clear on: Joe doesn't deserve a redemption arc. He even checks in with the showrunner, Sarah Gamble, to make sure the writers aren't going soft on him. Now that You is wrapping up, Badgley seems more than ready to move on. He's got a new production company, he's working on a book, and he's focusing on his family. Joe's story has come to a close in a way Badgley feels is fitting, but there's no question, he's ready to leave that chapter far behind. Badgley's preparation to portray Joe Goldberg was about challenging the audience and himself to look at uncomfortable truths about love, identity, and the stories we tell ourselves. Thanks for watching Collider. See you next time.